there have been some really big tournaments over the past week or so, and so I'm excited to look at this data and see how decks are performing over the course of the new year, I guess, and what decks might be really popular going into Brilliant Stars. Hey everybody, Nick from 9Card TCG, and today we're going to be looking at Trainer Hill data along with Limitless TCG data, just to get an idea of what decks are doing really well in this meta, and not only that, but what decks are really popular based on the tournaments that have been played online. Obviously, I don't really know about IRL data and what's going on at your locals. That's kind of for you to figure out, but I can tell you how different decks, do against others, and that's what matchup data means. So before I continue to sound like a complete moron, let's go over to Trainer Hill and start looking at some data. We'll say a couple of things as always. Firstly, the link to Trainer Hill is in the video description, along with Limitless TCG and Play.Limitless TCG, where we get all of our data from. That's number one. Number two, this is historical data and does not mean that any deck here that I say loses to another, it doesn't mean that it can't win in the future. It doesn't mean that if someone modifies a deck or as things change, that decks will start to win or lose at different rates. This is all just historical data. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. This is just to give you some information before you choose a deck to play in a tournament. Finally, the number of matches played really matters. So you can see there's a couple of blank spots here. There's no matchup data for that, so we can't really talk about it. But if there's a deck that has a 10% win rate, but it only was played one time that match, well, that means a lot less than a deck that has a 30% win rate and has played 100 matches of that, against that deck. So the number of matches matters a lot, and yeah, we'll start talking about some data. The deck with the asterisk is the deck with the win rate for this matchup. So Duraludon against Eternatus. Duraludon wins 40% of the time, right? All these numbers are in percents, and it's ordered from D to Z, right? It's going alphabetical order. I don't get to control it. It's just what it is. I kind of wish that they would do this by most popular or highest overall win percent or something, but alphabetical is just as good. So let's talk about these decks, their matchups, why they might win or lose, and then we'll talk about, well, yeah, just because these decks have these matchup spreads, how often do you even have to worry about said decks? And that's when we'll hop over to Limitless. So Duraludon has probably one of the worst matchup spreads that we'll see on this list. I mean, it loses to everything on there except for Suicune Ludicolo, which is a 50-50 split for some reason, but it loses to Eternatus, Rapid Strike Inteleon, Jolteon, Mew, Umbreon, Urshifu, Zacian. I mean, it loses to a lot of stuff. It will be Rapid Strike Urshifu, which is not on this list, which I guess we could go ahead and add. We can add, we'll do Urshifu Inteleon, right? So that'll pop in, and you can see that Duraludon wins against Rapid Strike Urshifu. Why does it win against Rapid Strike Urshifu? Well, because that deck is mostly using special energies, which Duraludon's Skyscraper ability prevents all damage from Pokemon with any special energies attached. However, Eternatus doesn't need special energies. Inteleon doesn't need special energies. Jolteon doesn't need special energies. Mew is fast enough where it can deal with it, even though they do have Fusion Strike energy. They don't need it, right? You can, more and more, Mew was a favorable matchup, and Duraludon kind of rose to some level of popularity because of its good Mew matchup. Not necessarily because it can knock out Mew, but because it had some alternate win conditions like boss stalling Genesect and stuff, and walling against Fusion Strike energies. Since that point, though, new players have kind of gotten smart and said, okay, well, we're going to include escape ropes and more switch outs and more basic psychic energies and just general ways to improve our overall matchup against Duraludon and matchups in general. So they have more switch outs and everything, so you don't even really beat Mew anymore. Suicune Ludicolo, with the tool scrappers and stuff, and you're able to one-shot Suicunes, and they often have things like capture energy, so they might not be able to damage you as easily. You lose to Single Strike Urshifu simply because Gmax One Blow can just go right through your Skyscraper ability. We don't have any data on Weezing Inteleon here, and you lose to Zacian because they're much faster, and they also don't use special energies. So, yeah, Duraludon, there was a time where it was looking pretty popular, and I think people still play it because there are those alternate win conditions. You can kind of run your opponent out of resources with Flanneries and Hammers, and using Team Yell Towel to heal your active, or Crystal Cave and heal your active, and all this kind of stuff. Like, it's really annoying to deal with, and so the times you do win, you have to play intelligently and just know how to run your opponent out of their resources. But other than that, yeah, it's a pretty slow deck to get rolling, and so that's one of its biggest drawbacks. And maybe with Brilliant Stars, we'll get a little bit of a faster Duraludon build with something like Arceus V-Star V. You just power up your Duraludon super quickly with Trinity Charge, or you can use the V-Star power to search your deck for 2 cards that you need that turn, and there's a bunch of things that might be able to make Duraludon a little bit better, but we'll see. Next on the list is Eternatus, which has, again, not a super great matchup spread, but it does have some wins where it counts. It's going to beat Duraludon for the reason we mentioned before. It so far has a 100% win rate against Galarian Weezing, but of course this is only 2 matches, and if I'm being super honest, I do not know what Galarian Weezing means for Trainer Hill. I also don't know what Weezing Inteleon means for Trainer Hill, which is why I'm including both. I do not know which version of the deck they are referring to, so if someone knows how I can find that out, that would be super cool. Like, does this information tell us anything? No, it doesn't. So that's unfortunate. So, but this is only 2 matches. We have no idea. As more matches are played, will this win rate change? It likely will. But we also lose to Rapid Strike Inteleon. We lose to Jolteon. We do beat Mew, which is why it's being played. We lose to Suicune. We lose to Single Strike and Rapid Strike. This Weezing variant we are split with, and that we lose pretty hard to Zacian. So, the most common decks, Jolteon and the Urshifus, you're losing to. Now, like I said, you do beat Mew, which is by far the most common deck. But man, that's going to be tough to get you to top cut if you're only beating Mew. This Galarian Weezing, again, similar issue. It's really only beating Mew. Everything else it's losing to. Rapid Strike Inteleon is a little bit better, right? We have a pretty neutral matchup against Urshifu, both the Rapid and Single Strike. We have a pretty neutral matchup against Suicune, slightly advantageous against Mew. We lose very hard to Jolteon, no surprise, they hit us for weakness. And then you have positive matchups against Duraludon and Eternatus. So, it's okay. It's a lot of neutral matchups, and then when you get the ones that you're favored for, you'll probably win, and then the ones that you are not favored in, obviously you're going to lose, but you have more unfavored matchups than you do favored. Even the ones that you are neutral in, you're slightly unfavored, right? The 45, 46, 47. I do consider 47, 46% to be pretty neutral, just like I consider 52, 53% win rate to be pretty neutral. So, don't get super hyped if you see your deck is beating something by 52, at a 52% win rate. That's just about 50-50. Next up is Jolteon. Now, Jolteon has some extremely positive matchups, which is why it's usually the 2nd or 3rd most common deck in the format, at least at the moment. Now, Jolteon and Rapid Strike Urshifu are going to have to deal with Manaphy at the end of February when Brilliant Stars comes out. And not to say that it's impossible, and that it definitely, they will take a hit, those decks, right? So enjoy the positive matchups now, and there will be some way of dealing with Manaphy. I don't know what the best way is at the moment, but I don't think Rapid Strike and Jolteon are going to straight up be brought into the brink of extinction with the resurrection of Bench Barrier, but they're definitely going to have an additional challenge that they need to take on. So do keep that in mind. If you're looking to build any of these decks, I think we are close enough to the release of Brilliant Stars where you either would want to hold off on building something or build something that isn't going to be affected as much by something like Bench Barrier. So if you don't already have Rapid Strike or Jolteon built, maybe wait, right? Maybe pick a different deck, or if you really want to build those, wait, a month or so before investing the money into those, because they might not be at the same level of popularity or prevalence or even relevance, really. So I would put that caution out there. But if you really want it, I mean, I don't know. I can't tell you how to spend your money. Go and get it. Anyway, enough about that. Let's look at the matchup data for Jolteon. 70% against Duraludon, 64 roughly percent against Eternatus, about 78%. Galarian Weezing, it's going to beat Rapid Strike Inteleon. It does beat Suicune Ludicolo, and it even beats Zacian. Jolteon is super strong, and the reason for that is the Max Thunder Rumble and the fact that it has free retreat, and you can use Max Thunder Rumble for just one energy with an elemental badge attached. So basically you just need a badge and an energy, or two energies, and then you're hitting the active for 100, and any bench Pokemon that has damage counters on it, you're hitting for an additional 100 damage. And it has the added, okay, so you obviously have to hit the active and a bench Pokemon that has any damage on it. So there's a little bit more restrictions than something like Gmax Rapid Flow. And you can't boost that damage as much as you could with Rapid Strike. Like, there's no Passimian or Telescopic. I guess the Telescopic Sight would do more damage, but you can't run that because you need the Elemental Badge so that you can attack faster or set up a little bit easier. So you're not doing extra damage, you're doing a flat 100, but that's still really good. With a couple of Scoop Up Nets and Galarian Zigzagoons and Quick Shooting Inteleons, you're knocking out Vs in 2 hits. That's 4 prizes. You're knocking out Vmaxes in a couple of turns, and yeah, you have 300 HP, but with free retreat and such a fast attack, I mean, I don't really see a reason why you wouldn't be able to take easier knockouts, especially on decks that have a lot of single prize supporters. Even against Single Strike Urshifu, probably one of the harder matchups for you. I mean, Rapid Strike Urshifu is the hardest matchup because they can go back-to-back Rapid Flow, but Single Strike Urshifu is not a very good matchup either, right? 123 matches, and you have a 40% win rate. That's probably where you're going to be. You're going to win 4 out of 10 games. You have the advantage of knocking out the Rapid Strike Urshifu Sobbles and the Single Strike Urshifu's Houndours and even Houndooms, really, if you're able to get Quick Shooting and Galarian Zigzagoon pings onto them. They need those cards. Both of those decks need those support cards. Single Strike Urshifu needs Houndours a ton. So if you're able to take them out before they evolve into the Houndooms, you just saved yourself potentially a game loss because they can't accelerate energies without Houndoom, and their attack cost being as high as it is, they need the Houndooms. So that is how you can deal with it, but you have so many other positive matchups. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7 positive matchups, and 1 fairly neutral matchup with Mew. If you're looking for a really good deck to play that is probably more affordable than Mew, Jolteon's probably the way to go. Speaking of Mew, Mew has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 positive matchups, and it's super good. It's beating Duraludon, it's beating Weezing, at least this version of Weezing, this Galarian Weezing. Still pretty neutral. It beats Rapid Strike Inteleon. It's slightly favored against Jolteon. It is beating Suicune. It's beating not super much. It is slightly. It's mostly neutral against Single Strike. You're beating Rapid Strike. You're losing to this variant of Weezing, but again, it's still not that much. And you are beating Zacian. So your worst matchup here is Eternatus, and if your worst matchup is a 35% win rate, you're able to win 1 out of 3. I mean, in a tournament setting where you're going best of 3, there's a chance that you can steal that round. And if you're going best of 1, well, I mean, that's pretty good. And like I said, we're going to look at the meta percent shares for all these decks and how popular each of them are. And you're going to see Eternatus not that common. So, I mean, Mew's worst matchup isn't even that popular of a deck. So, it doesn't have a lot to go for. If you can afford it and you want to play the undisputed best deck in the format at the moment, Mew is absolutely the way to go. Jolteon's a good second, and we'll talk about some other decks that might be suitable for you as well. So let's continue on. Suicune Ludicolo is probably, aside from Zacian, one of the most affordable decks on this list. Duraludon's also pretty cheap, but look at the matchup spreads. Eternatus is pretty cheap at this point, but you know, look at the matchup spreads. I would also say that the stuff that composes the Weezing decks, whether you're playing the Sableye version, whether you're playing the Galarian, like the different ways of doing it, also pretty cheap. So there's a lot of fairly affordable decks on this list. Suicune Ludicolo, though, I mean, it seems the matchups that it wins, and everything else it's either neutral or is pretty. It seems fairly neutral. So it's neutral with Duraludon. It's slightly favored against Eternatus. It loses to Galarian Weezing. It's going to be slightly favored against Rapid Strike Inteleon. It loses very hard to Jolteon. Again, no surprise because of that weakness. And you are slightly, I would say you're losing to Mew. You are beating Umbreon Urshifu, which is probably your best matchup. Not only because, obviously, the win rate, because of how popular Single Strike is. So you're likely to come across Single Strike decks in a tournament if you were to play Suicune Ludicolo. And I went to a 1.7K in Connecticut, and guess what? In my winning in, played Suicune Ludicolo. I actually played Ice Rider and Suicune Ludicolo. And so the two decks that I did not want to see were the ones that I happened to come across. So a little unfortunate there, and it just goes to show that, hey, Suicune Ludicolo still has some relevancy in this format. You are also going to be pretty neutral with the Rapid Strike version because they're able to hit the bench and knock out those low tads and keep you from doing that extra 100 damage with Suicune to take the knockouts that you need on those Vmaxes. That's kind of the core plan of Suicune Ludicolo, but you are beating Weezing Inteleon. Again, not many games played here, so I don't really put too much stock into this data. And then you are slightly favored against Zacian. So you're mostly neutral, a couple of mismatches here and there, and then some decks that you do really well against. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend Suicune Ludicolo at this point. Like I said, it's kind of something that if you're expecting a lot of Single Strike, you're expecting a lot of Weezing decks. Yeah, I mean, but the popularity of Jolteon and even Mew, something you don't really beat, is hard to ignore and is one of the biggest reasons that I would probably tell someone to not play this deck. It's just, that comes down to your comfort level with the deck, what you have available, and what you expect to be in the meta, right? There's just as many Jolteons as there are Single Strikes. So, yeah, you have those favorable matchups, but you also have just as many, if not maybe more, disadvantageous matches, or unfavorable matches is the word I was looking for. So, speaking of Single Strike Urshifu, this is my preferred deck, and it's the one I play the most if you know me, like, at all. Just look in the background. I got a Battle Styles poster, which is brand new and no one has commented on, which is a little strange, but it's okay. The Urshifu plush and the artwork, and it's what I do. So to see Urshifu have some pretty good matchups in this current top 10, top 12, whatever this is list, makes me very, very happy. I'm going to change this song. So Single Strike is beating Duraludon pretty handily. Again, Gmax 1 Ball was able to get through the Skyscraper ability, even though we are purely special energy at this point. We're beating Eternatus. That 66% is kind of the magic number, right? 66% is 2 out of 3. So you really want to see 66% on something, because that means you're going to be winning on average 2 out of 3 matches, which in a best of 3 in a regionals like event is what you're going to be playing. Best of 3. Top cut is almost always best of 3. So if you see that 66 or higher percent, you are sitting kind of pretty. You can just let the deck do what it does. You don't have to really worry too much. I don't know if this Eternatus list includes the Hoopa variants and stuff, but I mean, even if it does, this is still a really good win rate. So very happy to see that. You're beating Galarian Weezing. You're pretty neutral with Rapid Strike Inteleon. You're beating Jolteon. Now, you are hitting Jolteon for weakness, and you are still only winning 60% of the time, which in a best of 1 is fine. In a best of 3, you're favored to win, but it doesn't mean it's guaranteed. Why are you only 60%? Why do you only win 60% of the time? Well, for 2 reasons. One, you are a hybrid deck. You are dark fighting, which means there's not a guarantee you're going to start with a fighting type. You have just as many chances to start Umbreon as you do Urshifu. There's also the chance that you start things like Houndars, or if you're me, you tend to start Crobat for some reason, even though you only have 2. And there you go. Maybe if you're playing a Morpeko in there, there's a lot of things that could kind of go wrong. And unlike, something like Jolteon, where if you start a Sabo, it's actually not that bad, starting a Houndour and nothing else can be kind of problematic, because you don't want to attach your energies to that Houndour. There are times where it is okay to attack with a Houndour or Houndoom, usually against Mew and other single prize decks, but against Jolteon, unless you're taking a knockout on a Sabo or something, you generally don't want to do it. So taking the turns to attach your few precious energies onto a Houndour just to retreat and get them into the discard pile, it's not super good. So there's a lot of ways that Jolteon can win, and they can start picking off those Houndours before you even evolve them into Houndooms, and now you're in trouble. So just because you have the weakness advantage on Jolteon, it's only half your deck, if even. I mean, 4 of your all of your Pokemon are going to be fighting, and that's it. So you actually really don't even have that big of a fighting type advantage. However, if you are able to get a capture or quick ball out, ultra ball eventually when it comes out with Brilliant Stars, battle VIP pass to get that Urshifu into the field or onto the field very early in the game and start powering it up, now you have a much better chance, and you're going to be taking those 3 prize knockouts, and that's where this deck kind of works. You are favored a little bit against Mew. This is where that hybrid typing really helps you. You have the fighting type, which can take out things like Jolteon, Eternatus, Gengar, and it also helps with wall breaking between things like Zamazenta and Duraludon. You also have the dark typing to help with psychic types, Shadow Rider, Dragapult, and especially Mew. You're going to be taking pretty big knockouts on those things. You can take nice uptrades with, Umbreon V knocking out Mew Vmax. You do have to worry about Meloetta, of course, but that's a whole different story and a Mew problem in general. But you have this dual typing that a lot of decks don't have, and so it makes you a really formidable force in this current meta, where so many things are weak to dark or I shouldn't say Endor, but dark or fighting, and you kind of cover both bases. You have really good energy acceleration in the form of Houndoom, and you have really high damage output and wall breaking. There's a ton of reasons to play Single Strike Urshifu, and that's not just me pushing for the deck because I love it so much. I mean, again, look at the numbers here. We have 2, 4, 6, 7 favored matchups, if we're going to go strictly based on win percent, as many as Mew and Jolteon. So, I mean, it's a great deck. It is going to be a little expensive because of the Umbreons, and the Vmaxes especially are the most expensive pieces of this deck, but the rest of it's pretty cheap, and I can't recommend it enough. You do lose the Suicune Ludicolo, but we'll talk about why that's not that big of a deal, and you're slightly unfavored against Rapid Strike Urshifu. That's fine. Weezing, this version, whatever version this is, you do lose to, and Zacian you're favored against. That one really matters of... all single strike wins are determined by can single strike set up. It could be a little bit inconsistent at times. You're really reliant on finding your Houndours early and getting them into Houndooms, having single strike energies in the deck, being able to find the earned vitalities when you need them. There's a lot of things that have to kind of happen for Single Strike to function the way it best operates, but, you know, you make it work. And obviously it's not a top 5 deck for nothing or for no reason, and it doesn't have these win percents for nothing. So it does obviously work, and there are going to be times where, just last night I was playing a Team Challenge qualifier going against Mew. Would have won the game if I found an urn. Didn't find it, so I lost. I was played against a Shadow Rider deck, a deck that I should be able to crush. 3 of my Houndours got prized. I mean, just the statistical likelihood of that happening is astronomically low. I would have been fine with 2 of them getting prized, because then at least I can get energies going and start attacking as early as turn 2, but it just didn't happen. And those things do happen. It's out of your control. It's not the deck's fault. It's just poor randomization, poor luck. So you are going to lose to silly things like that. Cards you need being prized and stuff, but I guess that's every deck. Anyway, we spent too much time talking about Single Strike Urshifu. That's a lie. We never spent too much time talking about Single Strike, but we should move on to Rapid Strike. It's beating Eternatus. It's beating this Galarian Weezing. It's going to beat Jolteon even more than the Single Strike, because your main attacker, your really only attacker in the Melanie version of Rapid Strike is Urshifu, and you can hit them for 300 damage with a single fighting energy. If, you know, with Gale Thrust, you have to move the Pokemon from the bench to the active that turn, but with Escape Ropes and Air Balloons and Tower of Waters, that's a pretty easy thing to do. You are also favored against Single Strike. You're beating this Weezing. Again, 2 matches is really nothing. And you're pretty neutral against Zacian. So the things you lose against are Duraludon. Duraludon, again, is going to wall you out almost entirely. You're going to be losing to Mew very hard, and it's a really tough matchup to lose. But, you know, you're slightly favored against one of the most popular decks. You beat another one of the most popular decks, and you lose to another one. So Rapid Strike Urshifu is also not a bad choice, because you are winning and losing to the most popular decks, and that's good enough, I think. Not everyone's going to be playing Mew. Yes, it's the most popular deck, and so losing to it is a little bit tough, but you're doing well against some other really popular decks, so that kind of keeps this going. Weezing, we're not going to spend really any time on it, because the one thing it really beats is Rapid Strike Inteleon. It doesn't even really, it beats Mew, but I don't really know what version this is. It has, of the 2 of this compared to the Galarian Weezing, it does have the fewer matches played, according to Trainer Hill data, so I'm less likely to kind of look at this, but I did want to include it so you can at least look at it for yourself. If you know even which deck this is, I do not. And finally, before we move on to the meta share, let's talk about Zacian. It's beating Duraludon, it's beating Eternatus, it's beating this Weezing, it's beating Inteleon, it's gonna beat this other Weezing, random Weezing deck, and then everything else it's either losing to or fairly neutral with, right? 52%, 48%, I would consider those really neutral, and then it does lose to Jolteon, Mew, and Suicune. So you're neutral / losing to the most popular decks, which is, again, why this deck is not exactly top 5, right? It's in that top 5, like the 6 to 10 spot, and it's mostly Joshua Sutherland who's keeping this deck as high performing as it is, if we're being super honest. So, you know, good for Josh there. I mean, to keep this deck alive as long and relevant as, you know, he has is really impressive. I saw recently he added crushing hammers to the deck just to help with some of these matchups, especially things like Mew and whatever, and you know, you have the ability to wall against Mew Vmax with Zamazenta V, so that they can't hit into your Pokemon, because Dauntless Shield prevents all damage from Pokemon Vmax. Now they can go ahead and use Meloetta to deal with that, but you have more than one Zamazenta. They also have things like cross switchers and escape rope usually, so that they can force your Zamazenta out of the active, and that can be really problematic if you only have one. Haven't seen too many cross switchers in play. Actually, one of the reasons I lost to that Mew deck in yesterday's qualifiers, because they did run cross switcher and were able to bring up a Crobat to get the last 2 prizes instead of taking a knockout on a Houndour like I had put in the active. So random stuff to consider, but if I had to pick a deck for you to play, it's if it's not Mew, right, you either don't have the resources to play Mew, or you just kind of refuse to play Mew. I would probably recommend Jolteon or Single Strike. Those are the two I would pick. And let's take a look at why. So here we are at Limitless, and one of the reasons that we need to look at Limitless is because we want to know how popular these decks are. And if you look, this is over 290 tournaments with over just under 20,100 players rather. So we're looking at 20,000 participants over 56,500 matches. That is a ton of data, so you can kind of rely on this being accurate. And the share, Mew is 17.5% of the meta. That's almost 1 in 5 decks are Mew. And then everything else is sub 10, which means in 10 matches you will find one Single Strike Urshifu, one Jolteon. In every 10 matches, you know what I mean? Like, you're going to find not that many Jolteon, Rapid Strike Urshifus and Duraludons. So Duraludon is a pretty small portion of the meta, and we talked about something like Single Strike Urshifu. Look at Suicune Ludicolo, one of its worst matchups. It's number 9 on the list with not even 3% of the meta. So your biggest loss, not really that common. You're going to see, only 3% of all the decks played are Suicune Ludicolo. That's very, very little. It does have a pretty good win percent at just under 52%. Some of the other decks that you see, like Eternatus, Mew loses to Eternatus, but it's 2.5% of the meta. I mean, Gengar is 2% of the meta. Even Rapid Strike Inteleon is only 2% of the meta. It's not very common. So, this Leafeon, another poor matchup for Single Strike, not even 2%. So a lot of these really bad matchups, like when you think about Single Strike, it loses really hard to Suicune and it loses to Umbreon. Yeah, but no one's really playing these decks. Same thing with Jolteon. What does Jolteon lose to? Jolteon loses to Single Strike and Rapid Strike, right? Those are the things it loses to the most. Those are pretty common, right? Those are top 5 popular decks, is the Single Strike and Rapid Strike decks. So knowing what you lose to is part of the battle, but knowing how popular, how likely you are to encounter those decks, whether you're playing, this is obviously for online data, what you play or what you encounter at your locals and stuff is going to be different. But if you're going to go enter Zacosage's late night series, you're going to go play in the, I don't even know who else is doing tournaments, Sunny's Weekly or something like that. Now you have some information or some idea as to what decks you are likely to encounter. You're most likely to encounter Duraludon, Rapid Strike, Jolteon, Single Strike, Mew. Those are the things you're likely to encounter. Could you find that one player who's playing Shadow Rider Alcremie? Yeah, I played one yesterday in a team qualifier and lost. Like, it happens. Are you going to find that one person who's playing Stonejourner? Yeah, I played in Zacosage's tournament a week or two ago, and I played someone using Stonejourner, and just there was like 1 or 2 of them in the entire 360 some odd people playing. I found them. You do encounter these decks. I know there are people who want Rayquaza to do really well, and they just can't let go of that deck. You have these Weezing decks. I'm curious. Yeah, I mean, it's Sableye Inteleon is the more popular version and it has a 50% win rate. I just don't know exactly what's in this. Well, I guess maybe we can look, right? We can look. So we'll do that real quick. We will look at the Sableye list just to get an idea. And we'll see this person came in first, Gabe Shume, who I actually happen to know. Does this have Galarian art? So this is actually... Okay, so maybe we should look at this Sableye Inteleon. So we'll get rid of these Galarian Weezing and we'll look at Sableye Inteleon now that we know how it counts. And Sableye Inteleon... Okay, this is a little bit better, right? It beats Inteleon, Rapid Strike. It's going to beat Jolteon. It is only 50% with Mew, and this deck was kind of created to beat Mew. In the 3 matches it's played against Suicune Ludicolo, it has not won. It's 50% with Single Strike. It's you're losing really hard to Rapid Strike, which again makes sense. The loss, actually, it beats Jolteon, which I'm surprised. And you're losing to Rapid Strike. You would think with Rapid Strike and Jolteon's abilities to go ahead and hit the bench and take 2 prizes, it's mostly a single prize deck, that you would struggle against both, but you only are beating Rapid Strike. And I wonder if that's because Jolteon has a higher reliance on things like the Inteleon line than maybe Rapid Strike does. I'm not really sure, but you are also beating Zacian because you're turning off the abilities and they're not able to draw and accelerate energy as well. So yeah, I mean, this list is kind of what I thought of when I thought of this Galarian Weezing deck. It has Galarian Weezing to turn off abilities, it has the Galarian Moltres, the single prize version, to take those late game knockouts and just kind of hit hard into something like Mew. It has Sableye V to take fast knockouts and big knockouts after you put some damage on with quick shooting. You put some damage on with severe poison, and then you have Hoopa to do a quick 90 here and there. Also a really good way for Sableye to take a knockout. Tapu Koko is really just there so that you have a free retreat and a pivot, and then all these trainers to help support all of this. How does it do against Duraludon, Sableye Inteleon? We don't have any data against Duraludon. That's probably because Duraludon's popularity is a little bit on the decline. If you looked back like 2 weeks ago or so, Duraludon was climbing to be about 10% of the meta in some tournaments, and now overall it's only about 5%. So yeah, I think this is pretty interesting. So there you have it. There is a ton of information about some of the most popular and So there you have it. There's a bunch of information and data about some of the most highly performing, or the best performing decks of the past week or so. And not only that, but how popular and prevalent different decks are going to be. I feel like this music is a little too ominous to end the video on. And yeah, that's going to do it for us today. Thanks so much for watching. If you haven't already, please don't forget, hit the subscribe button, bell notification so you don't miss future videos. Leave a like and a comment to let me know that you enjoyed this video, and it's also a good way to tell YouTube that this is a good video and other people should watch it. When we hit 1,000 subscribers, we're going to be giving away some really cool stuff. We're going to have digital codes giving away. We're giving away some graded cards. We're giving away some base set stuff, and we have one really cool grand prize for someone, but you only can win if you subscribe, and you can only win, or this contest only starts when we hit 1,000 subscribers. So the more people that subscribe, the faster we can get this, and I'm very excited. I'm looking forward to the future Brilliant Starts. I think it's going to be a great set, and I'm looking to do some kind of tabletop play with some Brilliant Start proxies to get an idea of how this is going to go, but we'll talk about that in the future, and I'll see you next time.